Bentrovati sul canale video di Mito Dolcino. Io sono Simone Mariam. Mettete ovviamente mi piace il video se vi piace il video e iscrivetevi al canale. Sono lieto oggi di presentarvi un ospite molto gradito, Michael Shellenberger. Michael Shellenberger è giornalista e autore. Ha coeditato e scritto una serie di libri, tra cui Breakthrough, From the Death of Environmentalism to the Politics of Possibility, and Eco-Modernist Manifesto, e Apocalypse Never, Why Environmental Alarmism Hurts Us All, che è stato tradotto anche in italiano, L'Apocalisse può attendere, errori e falsi allarmi dell'ecologismo radicale. E inoltre fondatore dell'Environmental Progress, la cui strategia è quella di dire la verità sull'energia nucleare e sul diritto delle nazioni povere all'energia a basso costo. Troverete comunque tutte le informazioni a riguardo nel box sotto il video. Hi Michael, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. So I want to start the interview talking about your last book, Apocalypse Never, Why Environmental Alarmism Hurts Us All. You said that industry and modern agriculture are the keys to emancipate humanity. And you claim that the dogmatism of Greenpeace worsened the Amazon forest condition. Could you explain that to us?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to speak with an Italian audience. Italy is a country I care a lot about. We love to visit. And also there's an important character in Apocalypse Never who's Italian, named Cesare Marchetti, who was one of the major thinkers in terms of energy transitions. And he's still alive and he lives in Tuscany, and he's involved in sequencing the DNA of Leonardo da Vinci right now with a friend of mine in the United States. So I'm really happy to be with you. Apocalypse Never, I argue that climate change is real, but it's not the end of the world. It's not the most serious environmental problem. The most serious environmental problem continues to be poverty. 2 billion people rely on wood and dung as their primary source of energy. They reduce biodiversity in tropical rainforests just because they have to for survival. I think that's the biggest problem I worry about as an environmentalist. In the Amazon in particular, Greenpeace pursued a radical agenda that backfired and resulted in more forest being destroyed than should have been destroyed had they concentrated agriculture in the savanna region, which is known as the Cerrado, and allowed the Amazon proper rainforest to be protected. And they didn't pursue that out of really an anti-business agenda, which demanded that landowners set aside half to 75% of their land, which was highly inefficient and also had poor conservation outcomes, because it resulted in the fragmentation of the Amazon forest rather than the contiguous preservation of the Amazon landscapes.
So basically you're saying that the real problem is poverty. And I suppose, I do agree with you. The main problem is poverty. I want to move on because I know you think that nuclear power is very important. Why do you think so?
Well, nuclear energy is obviously, the most important technology in the world because it's the most dangerous technology. It's the technology that we use for nuclear weapons, which are the most powerful weapons ever invented. Nuclear weapons have protected the Western nations since World War II. The United States has a nuclear shield over Western Europe. It still exists despite the end of the Cold War. The United States also protects Japan and South Korea as part of the nuclear shield. Most Americans don't know that the United States is promised to protect Western Europe with nuclear weapons if it needs to, and that it's promised to protect Japan and South Korea. And so we're in a new age that I think is going to require a transformation of international relations. So I'm working on a new book about nuclear energy that will come out in 2022. And in it, I argue that the traditional arrangements need to change so that Western Europe needs to provide its own security with nuclear weapons, probably through France and Britain. and that Asia needs to provide its own security from Japan and South Korea. In terms of the energy source, nuclear energy is the best. It's the greatest source of energy. Why is that? Because it is almost magic. You can produce all the energy you need in your entire life from this amount of uranium because it's energy dense, and it produces no air or water pollution. Tiny amounts of waste are easily stored. They never hurt anybody, never will hurt anybody, never should hurt anybody. And so there's a paradox, which is hard for people to understand and accept, which is that nuclear weapons are the most dangerous technology in the world, and nuclear energy is the best way to make electricity, and it's the cleanest way to make electricity and the safest way to make electricity. But because of the association with weapons, people are afraid of it and try to stop its spread.
Yes, but as you said, it's a very, very easy way to produce energy. But due to its connection to the weapon industry, people are scared of it. But I want to ask you, why do you think we are experiencing such an hysteria on environmental issues? Why is it so difficult to have a democratic debate? Because I think there is zero tolerance about different ideas. What are your thoughts about that? On that?
Well, I think one factor is because we're so much safer now than we've ever been, that the climate is less of a threat to us than it's ever been. To give you one sense of it, there is a mass hysteria in the United States right now, driven by the national news media, in particular by the New York Times, about deaths from heat. Deaths from heat have declined 75% in the United States since 1960. More people die of cold than heat. The solution to heat is air conditioning. This is not, we don't need a radical technological breakthrough to save lives from heat. I've just been reading the New York Times archival newspaper coverage over the last 150 years, including going back to the 1890s. I mean, hundreds of people died from heat. Now, if somebody dies from heat, it's a terrible accident. So, just to give you a sense of it. So I think that, but if you read the media coverage in the 1890s and the 1930s, which was also a very terrible decade for heat in the United States, but also around the world, the journalists, they would say, how can this be happening? We've been making so much progress and things are mostly getting better. That was the kind of tone of the articles in the 1930s, which was a depression in the United States. Obviously, Europe was at war. So I think it's a really interesting change in consciousness. So to some extent, it's because we're so secure. In English, we have an expression, in the United States, we have an expression called safetyism, which just means that we're just paranoid and neurotic about things that are really of no risk whatsoever. Most of us die from heart disease or cancer or things late in life. We live longer than ever. We have very few children and we invest so much more in them and we spoil them. So to some extent, it's just reflective of a neurosis. But in Apocalypse Never, I argue that there's really three factors. There's money, power, and then this new climate religion, which has become a religion, and I think a substitute religion for declining belief in traditional religions. So very few people are actually practicing Catholics in developed countries anymore, but many people believe that we're going to be punished by the gods of climate change for our sins against nature. So I think there's something in us that needs religious belief. And if we don't believe in the traditional Judeo-Christian religions, we create substitute religions. And so the main one, I think, is climate change. But we also see a very similar religion, at least in the United States, around issues of racism.
Yeah, Mother Earth will punish us. That's what they say. They claim
Yes.
this in my country as well, and they're pushing for this agenda, as you mentioned, you know. And this helped me to connect with the green economy. What do you think about the green economy? Because it seems that only the EU bloc and North America are keen on applying it. Some commentators talked about a green autocracy, because I think China and Russia seem to have taken a different path. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that you have to talk in Europe about Germany and the guilt it experienced after World War II, and the ways in which Germany, to some extent, I think is trying to destroy itself and destroy German national culture, and then express its power through the EU. And I think that made Britain feel claustrophobic. So Britain obviously left. I think the new leaders in Europe, to some extent, is going to be France, because France has nuclear energy and has nuclear weapons. And with Brexit, that makes France a powerhouse. Now Germany's trying to make France do a lot of industrial wind turbines, and is experiencing significant grassroots resistance because of the ecological damage. I'm about to publish a piece showing that Germany's carbon emissions went up 25% last year. Went up 25% the first 6 months of 2021 as compared to 2020, because there wasn't very much wind. They just didn't have enough wind to blow the turbines. So I think it's a deeply contradictory religion or ideology. I think it comes from a romantic idea of harmonizing with nature. But I think on the topic that you're raising, it's also an expression of German power. It's an expression of the power of the bankers. It's an expression of the power of the diplomats who want to control the global economy through a global carbon market. They've wanted this for decades. We see them, they want to make energy more scarce. They want to make energy more expensive. It comes from the Malthusian tradition, the tradition of Thomas Malthus, the economist who believed that there were too many people in the world. So it's a very dark religious view, but it's also a kind of part of the neoliberal global order, where you see powerful nations, both Germany and the United States, but also big banks, BlackRock. You know, you see a lot of bankers in London that want to control the global economy. They want to control the societies, both for profits, but also, I think, in service of this new religion.
Yeah, I think history repeats itself, because it's always Germany. It's a cycle. Germany always comes in to destroy itself, as you said, you know. And we will see how it will go. I wanna ask you if there is an exit strategy from the green economy.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious path is to energy transitions towards more energy dense fuels. So it's very simple. It's just we go from wood to coal and hydroelectric dams to petroleum, natural gas, uranium. And along that path, you're moving from fuels that are more carbon intensive to fuels that are more uranium intensive or hydrogen intensive. They're more energy dense. And so we're moving away from coal to natural gas. In the United States, nobody knows this, but we reduced our carbon emissions 22% below 2005 levels in 2020. And the reason is mostly because of fracking and offshore natural gas drilling. So that's a very positive move, because everybody knows natural gas is much less polluting than coal. And then then in addition to gas, you move to nuclear, towards uranium. And then you move away gradually over 100 years from natural gas for cooking and heating and transportation to hydrogen gas. This was all very well understood in the 1960s. Cesare Marchetti, who's one of the great Italian energy theorists, is a character I wrote about in Apocalypse Never. They talked about the transition from a carbon-intensive economy to a hydrogen-intensive economy. Renewables are in the past. Renewables, solar, wind, those are how we powered peasant feudal economies. Anybody who wants to return to renewables wants to return to some extent to a feudal system. So we need to move away from renewables. They use 300 times more land. Both solar and wind use 300 times more land on average than a natural gas or a nuclear plant. And our farms need to become more efficient and productive, which they are. It's nice to have beautiful farms for nature, like in Tuscany or in Napa in California or Provence in France. But for the most part, we produce our food in very agricultural, very energy intensive farms with a lot of machines, and more through greater efficiency. That's how wealth is created. And so I think for me, that's what matters. I think a country like Italy needs to take greater control over its economy. You've allowed your manufacturing sectors to be decimated. Nations need productive manufacturing sectors to be first-rate nations. It doesn't mean that we should be making t-shirts, but Italy makes some of the world's finest shoes and suits and clothing. There's no reason that Italy should lose its entire clothing industry to China when Italy makes the finest clothing in the world. Or we see France makes very fine nuclear power plants. Italy makes very fine cars, automobiles. So nations need to some extent, make sure they protect their high-tech industries, because that's part of having a productive, independent economy.
I do agree with you. I mean, we need to get rid of this ideal of being connected to Mother Earth through these renewable energy. That's what you're saying, and move over to gas and power plants in order to create a fairer society, because the world is full of people. We need to feed all of them. Otherwise, as you said, we're going to go back to a feudal system. But maybe someone wants to go back to a feudal system. That's what makes me think, you know, when you said something about the feudal system, it came in my mind, pop up in my mind, something like that. Someone, maybe, as you mentioned before, the bank system, or some groups, some powerful groups, maybe want us to go back to the past in order to control us better. I think.
Yeah, though it doesn't work, because everybody wants growth. Everybody wants economic growth and prosperity. Everybody wants that, including the parents of Greta Thunberg. They want prosperity too. Greta Thunberg is a product of wealth and prosperity. And so it's truly suicidal to move towards expensive energy. It's the destruction of civilization. You know, our electricity, cheap electricity, is the foundation of modern affluent societies. So to make electricity more expensive is to destroy the wealth of a society. So I think it comes ultimately, I point out, you know, when the conquistadores went to Mexico, they really believed in God. They were really wanted to spread religion, but they also wanted the gold. But I do think there's a religious motivation, but has a financial aspect to it. But I think the finances are how the religion sustains itself. So I think the big question, including for a country like Italy, which never embraced nuclear power, rejected nuclear power out of fears, how does a country like Italy develop a new counter myth that embraces modernity and rationality and economic prosperity, and a vision of environmental protection, a vision of environmental progress that is consistent with modernization and progress?
That's a very good question. And I think we can leave this question open to our audience, so they can try to think about that, you know. And I want to thank you for all the information you gave us. And if you want to add something, you're more than welcome. Or if you want to add something, you're more than welcome.
Sure. Well, I would say it's important for countries like Italy, but also the United States and France, all countries, to have a good idea about what makes them special and what makes them unique and different. Because on the one hand, we are becoming more integrated. You and I are able to talk to each other as citizens of different nations, and it's a beautiful thing. And I'm going to travel to your country and you come here and we have these exchanges. But I think it's important also for nations to appreciate the things that they need to protect. And what are the things that make Italy special? You know, people go to Italy because they want to visit Italy, and they don't want Italy to be like America. They don't want Italy to be like Japan or like Germany, especially not like Germany.
Yeah.
And I think that the people of a nation need to understand that, and that they're going to make decisions around their policies and politics that are deeply patriotic. I think some people might say nationalist, but that's a word that's become very controversial. But I would say that have a national interest, because Americans want Italy to be like Italy. Nobody wants Italy to be like Germany. But I do think that the policies that Italy has chosen have undermined its specialness as a country. And you've allowed your own industries to be undermined by both this green ideology, but by globalization. It just went too far. And so I think that we're seeing a reaction to that. So I think that the challenge for Italians is to develop a pro-Italy politics that is not burdened by the nationalisms of the past. I was interviewed by a reporter for La Repubblica, one of your big newspapers.
Yeah.
And she did a whole interview with me, and then she never published it. And I think it's because she didn't like what I was saying. And I think she didn't like what was in Apocalypse Never. And one thing she said to me, she said, "What you're saying sounds very populist," which I think has a particular meaning in Italy that's different than in the United States somewhat. But I understand what she's saying. She's saying that what I'm saying suggests it's too demagogic or something. And I think that shows the extent to which the Italian elites, the ruling media discourse and classes, are really divorced from the desires and the needs of the people and of the country of Italy. So there needs to be a celebration of Italianness and of Italy and what makes Italy special, and there needs to be a politics around that. I think what we're seeing is that that can have a lot of power in countries like France, where the yellow vests, les gilets jaunes, I believe in French, organized very successfully to demand that the President Macron not do the tax on petrol, on gasoline. And I think that movement has a lot of potential across Europe, but I think it has to be humanistic. I think it has to be pro-technology. It has to be pro-progress. And it needs some good leaders to articulate what that vision is. Because I think that there's a vision where there is international cooperation, but there's also national self-interest and sovereignty and national development. And we need to, I think, move beyond some of the traditional left-right divisions around the role of government, around socialism, around nationalism, and help each other to enter what I think is becoming a new age, a new century, where we can have these international relationships. But nations like Italy, which have been traditionally on the periphery of the European Union and of great powers, can protect and expand what makes it special as a nation.
Yeah, you're definitely right. We need to defend our national interest, but at the same time, be able to live in a cooperative world, because we throughout technology and progress we can connect each other, and many other things can be done. But you need to protect yourself. You need to have your identity. I know, as you said, the word nationalist, nation is like a blasphemy, you know. And you mentioned La Repubblica. La Repubblica, yeah, is is a newspaper like controlled by some, I mean, I don't want to say, but it's a globalist newspaper, you know, and they push for the globalist agenda and for the EU agenda. So of course they won't care about what this kind of they will be scared about this kind of information. Well, you provided us with a lot of valuable information. Thank you very much for your time and for joining us today. Okay, thank you very much. Have a nice day.
You too.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.